Well, this is one of those nights when we are very lucky to be joined by former federal prosecutors Andrew Weissman and Glenn Kirshner, because we need their experience and expertise to analyze what would normally be a routine filing in a criminal case, which Special Prosecutor Jack Smith used this afternoon to hit back hard against Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyers. The 10-page ruling, followed by a signature page with Jack Smith's name at the top, says that Donald Trump's request for an indefinite continuance for the trial date, quote, borders on frivolous. Jack Smith knocks down every argument the Trump lawyers make for an indefinite delay. On page 2, Jack Smith says, quote, the defendants chide the government for seeking an expedited trial, but in doing so, they have it exactly backward. A speedy trial is a foundational requirement of the Constitution and the United States Code, not a government preference that must be justified. Jack Smith says that the Trump lawyers are wrong to claim that the case involves complex new legal issues. On page 3, Jack Smith says, they should not be permitted to gesture at a baseless legal argument, call it novel, and then claim that the court will require an indefinite continuance in order to resolve it. One aspect of the request for more time by Trump lawyers that seemed to make sense, to me at least, in their filing was the Trump lawyers' description of the enormous amount of evidence that the prosecutors have given to the defense lawyers already as part of the discovery process. But Jack Smith points out the defendants have failed to include important information about the government's discovery productions. For example, the government's production included a set of key documents referenced in the indictment or otherwise determined by the government to be pertinent to the case. Jack Smith also points out that prosecutors have already given Trump lawyers material earlier than they have to. On page 6, Jack Smith says the government has made these productions promptly following arraignment, despite having no obligation to do so, including material that does not need to be turned over until, quote, the morning of the first day of trial. Jack Smith reveals that content obtained from 2 of defendant Walt Nauter's devices has not yet been turned over to the criminal defense team of defendants Trump and Nauta. Jack Smith points out that he is also asking for a continuance, but not an indefinite one. On page 6, Jack Smith says it also bears emphasis that the government has already sought a nearly 4-month continuance of trial, in part because of the need for both sides to review and process discovery. Jack Smith says emphatically that the classified information procedures do not justify a continuance after Donald Trump's lawyers described them as particularly onerous and time-consuming. On page 7, Jack Smith says the government intends to transport these materials early next week to the sensitive, compartmented information facility, SCIF, maintained for cleared defense attorneys at the C. Clyde Atkins Courthouse in Miami. 2, the Trump lawyers claim that it would be just impossible to impanel a fair jury before the presidential election. Jack Smith says our jury system relies on the court's authority to craft a thorough and effective jury selection process and on prospective jurors' ability and willingness to decide cases based on the evidence presented to them. The conditions that defendants argue will make it a challenge to select a jury will not appreciably change after the completion of the election. The last line of Jack Smith's filing says, for all of these reasons, the court should reject defendants' invitation to defer consideration of a trial date and should set jury selection to begin on December 11th, 2023.